In the heart of Lagos, where the sun set in vibrant hues over the bustling city, the Sapphire Royal Hotel stood like a gleaming jewel. It was a place where Africa's elite gathered, seeking luxury and privacy. This was no ordinary hotel. It was a playground for the rich and powerful, a sanctuary where they could be pampered without the prying eyes of the world. Among the staff at the Sapphire was Lola, a young woman with a quiet elegance and a steely determination. She had worked as a housekeeper for nearly 2 years, known for her exceptional dedication and honesty. She came from a humble background, supporting her family in a small village, but she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who knew her worth. One particular weekend, the hotel buzzed with news. Joshua Fadip, a Nigerian billionaire with an empire spanning tech, real estate and energy, was checking in with 2 of his closest friends, Taiwo and Chinedu. Joshua was known not only for his wealth but also for his charisma and charm. Women swooned at his mere presence, and men envied his success. Yet Joshua himself often felt stifled by the expectations and attention, longing for authenticity in a world that only seemed to see his bank account. The following morning, Joshua, Taiwo and Chinedu headed out early for a yacht tour along Lagos's coast. In their hurried departure, they left the suite in mild disarray. Lola was assigned to clean the VIP suite that day. She knew that high-profile guests occupied this suite and took extra care as she prepared her cleaning cart, adjusting her uniform and mentally preparing herself for the task. As she entered the suite, the grandeur struck her: the silk curtains, the plush leather sofas, the polished mahogany furniture, and the breathtaking view of the Lagos skyline. It was a different world, and she felt like a visitor in a palace. She moved through the room with focus, careful not to disturb anything important. Then, as she was straightening up the bedside table, she noticed a small, exquisite box, slightly ajar. Inside was a diamond-studded watch and a pair of cufflinks, shimmering with gold and inlaid with tiny sapphires. Her heart skipped a beat. These must be worth more than my family could make in a lifetime, she thought, eyes wide as she took in the glittering valuables. She felt a small pang of temptation. With valuables like these, her family would never want for anything. But almost immediately, she scolded herself for the thought. She took a deep breath, closed the box carefully, and put it back on the bedside table. She knew what she had to do. As soon as she finished cleaning the suite, Lola headed to the manager's office. Mr. Okoro, the hotel manager, looked up as she entered. "Mr. Okoro," she began, her voice steady, "I found something valuable in the VIP suite. I believe they belong to Mr. Fadipe. I thought it best to report it immediately." The manager's eyes widened, impressed. "Lola, you realize that most people wouldn't even think to return such items. This is admirable of you." She simply nodded. "I was raised to do the right thing, sir." Mr. Okoro smiled, shaking his head slightly. "Thank you, Lola. I'll make sure Mr. Fadip knows about this." Later that afternoon, Joshua returned to the hotel, and his assistant relayed the manager's message. When he heard about Lola's honesty, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. He was so used to people trying to take advantage of him that the notion of a young housekeeper voluntarily returning such precious items caught him off guard. Intrigued, he requested to meet her. Lola was informed of his request, and though she was nervous, she prepared herself as best as she could. She entered the lounge, where Joshua sat with an air of casual elegance, his friends beside him. When he looked up, he saw a young woman with striking eyes and a quiet grace that commanded respect. "Miss Lola," he began warmly, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to thank you personally. You didn't have to return those items. I'm curious, why did you?" Lola met his gaze, her voice steady. "My parents always taught me that integrity is more valuable than any diamond or gold. I didn't even consider keeping them." Joshua's eyes lingered on her, impressed by her simplicity and honesty. He exchanged a quick glance with Taiwo and Chinedu, both of whom seemed equally struck by her. "Do you know how rare honesty like yours is?" Joshua asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Lola gave a small, humble smile. "I don't think honesty should be rare, sir." A silence fell between them as they held each other's gaze. For Joshua, it was as if he was seeing someone truly genuine for the first time. She didn't fawn over him, nor did she seem intimidated by his wealth or status. He was fascinated. "Would you mind joining us for tea sometime, Lola? I'd like to know more about the person who reminded me of the values I sometimes forget," Joshua said, surprising even himself. Lola hesitated, looking to Mr. Okoro for guidance, but his encouraging nod reassured her, and she agreed. Over the next few days, Joshua found himself drawn to Lola, and they began meeting for small chats during his stay. He asked her about her life, her family, and her dreams, and she spoke with sincerity, unguarded. Lola revealed stories of her village, her dreams of helping her siblings, and her wish to one day return to school. One evening, as they walked through the garden surrounding the hotel, their conversation took a more personal turn. "Lola, do you ever dream of a different life?" Joshua asked, hands clasped behind his back as they strolled. Lola shrugged. "I suppose I do sometimes, but I know my place, sir. My duty is to my family. I don't allow myself to think about a life that isn't mine." Joshua stopped, turning to face her. "And what if that life were possible? What if you didn't have to choose between your family and your dreams?" Lola laughed softly, shaking her head. "Such a life is not meant for someone like me, Mr. Fadeep." "Joshua," he corrected gently, looking into her eyes. "Call me Joshua." She met his gaze, surprised, and nodded. "All right, Joshua." Their connection grew with each passing day, an unspoken understanding and respect binding them together. But it wasn't long before rumors began to swirl. Other hotel staff noticed how often Lola was with the billionaire and began whispering behind her back. Jealousy simmered, and soon enough, word reached Joshua's assistant, who worried about the potential scandal. One afternoon, his assistant confronted him. "Sir, it's not appropriate. People are talking. She's a housekeeper, and this kind of attention, it could damage your reputation." Joshua's eyes narrowed. "Since when did my personal life become anyone else's business?" he shot back. "If people want to talk, let them. I don't care." Yet the assistant's words weighed on him. Later that evening, as he met Lola in the garden, he was quieter than usual. "What's wrong, Joshua?" she asked softly, sensing his unease. He sighed, glancing at her. "People are talking about us, Lola. They think that you and I shouldn't be spending time together." She looked away, sadness flashing in her eyes. "Maybe they're right, Joshua. You're a billionaire, and I'm just me." Frustrated, he gently took her hand, holding it between his own. "Do you believe that, Lola? Because I don't. You're not just anything. You're one of the few real people I've met in my life, and I don't care what anyone else thinks." She looked at him, torn, her heart pounding. "But Joshua, our lives are so different." Joshua's grip on her hand tightened. "Our lives may be different, but our hearts, they're the same. I don't want to let go of this. Not when I finally feel like I've found someone who sees me for who I am, not what I own." A tear escaped down her cheek as she whispered, "But how can we make it work?" "One step at a time," he replied, his voice filled with determination. "Let me show you that I'm serious. I don't just want you as a friend, Lola. I want you in my life. Forever." In that moment, standing under the soft lights of the garden, they shared their first kiss, a quiet promise of love that would defy the odds. Joshua returned to the Sapphire often in the coming months, and each visit deepened their bond. Eventually, he proposed in that very same garden where their connection had blossomed. Lola's acceptance brought him a joy he'd never known. Their story, dramatic and unlikely, became the talk of the city, a symbol of how love and respect could bridge even the widest gap. For Lola, it was a fairy tale. For Joshua, It was a chance at the authentic love he'd always longed for. And together, they built a life that proved above all that integrity and love were worth more than all the diamonds in the world.